Welcome to the Road of Stars podcast. We meet amazing creative leaders from all over the world. I'm your host, Mwenya Kawesha. I work in artificial intelligence and arts. On this show, we speak to brilliant creators, entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs who are transforming creative industries. They share how they began and what they do to succeed in a changing world. Everyone who wants to pursue a creative life and career should have that opportunity. Together, we can make the world more creative. Hello, I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Lucy Davies. Lucy is Executive Director at the Young Vic Theatre. She was previously Executive Director at the Royal Court Theatre and was Executive Producer at the Donmar Warehouse and at National Theatre Wales. Her career has been dedicated to developing writers and artists, including as Head of Studio at the National Theatre and 5 years in the film industry. Lucy is the co-chair of Soho Theatre Walthamstow and sits on the board of Brighton Dome and Festival. She is a creative climate leader and Creative Green Champion 2020 and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Lucy, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you very much.
This is rather delightful.
Always to spend time with
you. Amazing. Okay, I feel just in full disclosure, maybe we should just reveal how we know each other before. Yeah, so I remember you in, I think it was January 2020, you were Executive Director at the Royal Court Theatre and you interviewed me.
To sit on the board. And you blew our minds. We kind of vaguely scoped out the skill set of people we wanted in trustees and then you were like, and her. We need her. Aww. Yeah, you were an incredible trustee in the years that I was there at the court.
Oh, thank you so much, Lucy. But yes, I'm so delighted to have you and to sit with your story. So, going back to the beginning, which I'm always desperate to know this about you, what early pieces of work and experiences contributed the most to you being where you are today?
This was such a brilliant provocation when you sent me this question in advance. I've worked in theatre all my career and I didn't have a sort of epiphany moment. Here's the montage sequence of early life that I think may have contributed. We both grew up in Birmingham, you and I.
Yes.
And my primary schooling was in the 70s. My secondary schooling was in the 80s. And during the 70s, I'm older than you, there were a lot of strikes and a lot of school strikes. So I remember there were times when it felt like I only really physically went to school about 3 days a week and the others were strike days. I grew up in quite a radical activist community where not theatre so much, but reading, music, art, visual art, TV, actually great drama was really part of the ecology of my life. And on the days when we as a bunch of kids weren't at school, the parents would kind of take it in turns to run like a class. And there was some super brainy parents, so that we had some great lessons. But my dad decided to make a movie. He had a cine camera, and there must have been about 8 of us, and we must have been about 9. And he made a movie with us on this day, and I loved it so much, this experience of making a film with my pals and my dad, and thinking about the story we'd tell and where we'd do it. I can really vividly remember it. So I think things like that were sort of really instrumental in my formative years. There was never an idea that there were proper jobs, and then there was creative jobs. Creative jobs were proper jobs and felt really within reach or made possible by my parenting, even though they were not artists at all. Skip forward, montage sequence, to when I'm 17. I went on my own to the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford and saw a production of Titus Andronicus, directed by Deborah Warner, incredible director. And there were not many women theatre directors around that time. I remember where I was sitting, I remember what I was wearing. So this maybe was a kind of epiphany moment. And because I never wanted to be an actor, I think realising that a woman could direct a play, and then I was like, what does that mean? What's she done? What's directing a play? I did know, really. I was, at that point, beginning to do a theatre studies A-level. And then I got the programme and I saw that the assistant director was Katie Mitchell. Katie Mitchell, one of our finest theatre directors, works a huge amount in Europe. And seeing these two women had made this piece of work and that was a role, you could be an assistant director and then you could be a director. That was a real gateway in my mind. So then I did a drama degree. And in the second year of my drama degree, this has been a thread through my life, it was quite an activist time. The department was becoming quite radicalised. There was a lot of kind of dismantling of the curriculum that we were learning, the artists we were learning, quite a kind of sexual politics place. And it had got really lively. The third years were like up in arms. The first years were like, oh my God, what's going on here? And we second years were the bridge, I guess, between these kind of dynamics. And it was decided that the drama faculty would hold a kind of meeting of the tutors and the students, and we'd all come together and thrash it out. And one of the professors approached me and said, Lucy, will you chair this meeting? And I was like, what? And I did. And looking back, that was a real moment for me about what I now believe leadership is, which is really about holding space and holding difference and convening brilliant, complicated, difficult minds to travel through a question. We were all there, all filled out the largest room, loads of people there. Can't actually remember that much about the content of the meeting, but I remember reflecting for a long time afterwards on, I wonder why they chose me to do that. And also reflecting on what skills I'd brought to that space. And the fact that I think I was sort of trusted by the activists, had kind of activist pedigree, but I was also trusted by the teachers because I was a SWAT.
Not surprised.
Activist SWAT, that's my tagline. So yeah, I think those three things have all contributed to why I'm here today, as in sort of in leadership, in the cultural sector, have always worked in organisations that are quite pioneering, quite fearless, and why I work with artists, and why my taste is Deborah Warner and Katie Mitchell.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Lucy, that's so fascinating. Just digging into a couple of areas. You mentioned that you didn't want to be an actor. Around you, did you see that most people who wanted to be in the creative fields did?
Yeah, I think that's really true still today. So I did go to a youth theatre for a little bit, but not for long, because that was all about acting. And at my school, they did a musical of something. I was like invited to audition for it. I found it all really embarrassing. So didn't. I think that felt like the only available route, youth theatre or auditioning for your school play. And I didn't want to be technical. I knew that I was interested in writers and writing, and that's why the filmmaking piece was so good, because I was like, there's something here about where we're pointing the camera and organising everyone. That's what it is, basically organising everyone. That's it. That's my job.
I love that that environment inspired so much creativity for you. You can get this sense of, doom and gloom, there's nothing, but so much came from what sounded like a pretty difficult external environment. And to be honest, I'm really not surprised that your teacher picked you to chair that meeting just from knowing you.
Yeah, but I didn't know who I was at 21. Yeah. You know, they knew who I was. I didn't know who I was.
Yeah, it's so funny how you described yourself. What was the phrase? The activist...
And a SWAT.
The activist and a SWAT. That really
is me. Is that me? I'll take it.
It really is. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. Because it means you can be in all these different spaces. So you can build the trust with people and with credibility, but also push things forward. And often you can get kind of a little bit trapped, like, I've got all these ideas, but nobody's listening to me. But I think that combination of qualities that you've got, I would hypothesize is sort of one of, as a strength. Yeah.
And I think that thing about winning trust of multiple constituencies or multiple stakeholders is so important to leadership anyway, isn't it? There was a brilliant civil rights movement organiser called Bill Moyer, American, and he defined these roles of social change, 4 roles of social change, and one of them he called the advocate reformer, and they are the people who get inside institutions and win the trust of power holders and move things forward that way. But you need everyone. You also need the protesters and the people gluing themselves to things, or do you? I don't know. Sorry, controversial. Maybe you do. You need all these different forms of social impulse to kind of make things happen, and I think I've always been drawn to institutions and power holders, and my parting comment will return to this theme perhaps.
Fabulous. And Lucy, so when did you make the decision to become a producer? And for anyone in the audience who isn't as close to sort of what a producer does, I think we always hear about producer on TV and that kind of thing. Could you explain a little bit about what the producer role entails and also how that manifests particularly in theatres as well?
Yeah, great question. And this role, you introduced me with my job title, which is executive director. Not all executive directors in theatre have come a producing path. There are quite a few paths into exec directing. You might come through finance or marketing or operations. There's lots of routes up through the theatre system into the leadership role. But my path, as you say, has been through becoming sort of through development, the development of writers, commissioning of writers, heading up a development, as you said, at the National Theatre, and then into exec producer and producing. And as an exec producer, I was a very active producer of work. It's very similar in film. It's everything from the financing, the operations, the logistics, but the creative development of the project and then the realising of it into the world and into finding its audience. And as an exec director, you do that, or an exec producer, similar roles, you do that within a building. So my accountabilities are around what you might call the business of the organisation, fundraising, marketing, operations, that finance, that whole piece. And then often in a theatre, we work in partnership with an artistic director who then curates the artistic programme and leads the artistic team. And you work really closely together. I've sort of ended up going down the path of holding an organisation, and that piece really interests me, holding the culture of an organisation, really driving the vision and the strategy, and that stuff I really love.
Just going through your bio, for anyone who's maybe not as close to UK theatre, these really are a lot of the most prestigious theatres in the country and in the world. And you've really navigated producing and maintaining the trust and the faith of creatives along the way, which over the past however long you've been in the business, that really is such a challenging feat. And there aren't many people like you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I'm really
That's not true. There
really aren't. There really aren't.
There's some great people. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's so interesting, isn't it, that you talked about the external environment when I was 9. Because actually the external environment now is pretty taxing. Mm-hmm. And maybe that strengthened me to grow up in an environment that was super political and challenging and difficult times, and racial justice, climate justice, gender justice, all that stuff was really ripe in the 70s, and it is now. That does make cultural leadership testing, the external environment, let alone the fiscal, financial environment. But there are brilliant people, and often in these roles, the exec director role, they can be not as visible as the artistic directors, and I have been really shored up by some incredible comrades in other theatres, in my sister theatres, and I really do stand on the shoulders of some other fantastic women producers who I've also learnt from and been guided by. Caro Newling, Sonia Friedman, Nika Burns, Thelma Holt. There's some legendary women in theatre who I was able to look up to and learn from, and they were idiosyncratic and radical and fierce advocates for their artists. I've had some really extraordinary role models, so I'm very blessed. I've blagged it all the way.
No. If that's blagging it, then I hope we can all do that.
You can, people.
Okay, so moving a little bit further into your career. So you've been at the heart of great storytelling in this country and internationally. Which are the stories, could be any medium really, that you're most proud that you helped to get told?
Amazing question. And I've produced or been around or exec produced or supported hundreds of theatre projects over my career. So I'm going to talk about 3 that I do. I feel not even proud, I just feel honoured to have been within proximity of the moment they were born into the world. And one of them is The Passion, which was a project I produced for National Theatre Wales's launch year in partnership with Wildworks, who are a brilliant theatre company based in Cornwall. And it was really the whole idea was the brainchild of the actor Michael Sheen. And we really collaborated closely on this idea, which was to revive this childhood passion play that had taken place in his hometown of Talbot when he was a kid. But in a very kind of radical new way, it would take over the whole town over 4 days of Easter weekend. But it had this incredible digital wraparound strategy that people hadn't really done before, that started 40 days prior. So many stakeholders, civic, charity groups in the town. I mean, I can't even sum it up. It was just an extraordinary project. The BBC made 2 documentaries. We also made a feature film. Dave McKean directed a feature film around it. It was a life-changing and theatre-changing project to work on for me, and to actually, interestingly, Radio 4 just did their show, The Reunion. They just did one about it. So anyone who's interested, go and listen to that.
Amazing. How did it change your life?
The impact it had on that town. Port Talbot is a town of 35,000 people. 12,000 people came to see The Passion. So a third of a town showed up. There wasn't a person in Port Talbot who didn't know that was happening that weekend. We committed to it a bit more than a year in advance, but the hard work started about 9 months in advance. That period of just really embedding the show and creating the show and developing the show with the writer. We suddenly decided like a week before it, let's publish the text as like a little novella. So we then turned a little novella around in 3 parts, because it took place over this Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's like everyone involved in it just brought their A game with such generosity, but it sort of felt effortless because it just felt right. And yeah, the impact on the people, the quality of the art in it was just unbelievably brilliant and beautiful and clever, and Michael was just extraordinary. Yeah, it was one of those things that mattered. It mattered, and it had an extraordinary legacy.
Amazing. And just for anyone who's not come across it, what's the headline summary of?
It was called The Passion of Port Talbot, and it was part of National Theatre Wales's launch year, and it happened in April 2011. It was based on the Passion story. The idea was this teacher had come back to the town, he'd lost his memory, and he had to rebuild who he was through re-remembering the town. So on the Saturday night, there was a Last Supper that took place in the Seaside Social Club, and the Manic Street Preachers played, and we had thousands of people out in the backyard watching it on a big screen. It followed the kind of beats of the Passion story. There was a Garden of Gethsemane. There were some of those beats, but they were modernised and reimagined and re-offered to people as a way of thinking about their own lives, their own relationship with their families and themselves and their faith and their town. It was wild. Amazing. Anyway, that's one. The second is a play by Debbie Tucker-Green called Ear for Eye. Debbie is such an important playwright, such a beautiful woman, such a brilliant mind, such a fantastic collaborator. I've had the privilege of working with her on a handful of her plays. But Ear for Eye, I think, is her masterpiece. It's a play in 3 parts. The first part, snatches of conversation between families. The middle part is a duologue between a black student and her white professor. And the final part is very challenging to listen. It was very challenging to watch and to listen to. It was recordings that Debbie made, films that Debbie made of white people, real people, not actors, reading the Jim Crow laws. And this trinity of acts really was her way of questioning race. And the characters in the second part, the student and the professor, were American. And in the first part, there were a mixture of American and British families. It just had all of Debbie's... She just has this incredible magisterial way of conjuring... Okay, here's a brilliant line. Theatre doesn't demand you to change. It just asks you to look. And that's what Debbie does. She makes you look, and it's overwhelming and brilliant and revelatory and challenging and so much love. She writes with so much love, and she's just a beautiful poet of words, and I absolutely love that. And the production, she's a brilliant director, so she always directs her own work. The production was beautifully staged in this sort of glass box that became transparent and then didn't. That she pulls together the most incredible actors. She creates an incredible company. Yeah, it was just an extraordinary theatre event. And then the final one, in similar territory really, is another of my superheroes is playwright Carol Churchill, who's still changing the way we think about theatre into her 80s. So this play she wrote in her very late 70s is called Escaped Alone. It's 4 women sitting in a back garden. And then in between these scenes between them, in which you discover extraordinary, amazing things about their lives and their marriages and what they've done, one of them pops out and delivers again, absolutely exquisitely staged at the Royal Court, pops out and delivers these apocalyptic monologues that are really about the state of the world now. And then she pops back in and sits in her deck chair and chats to her mates. And again, just conceptually brilliant, so funny, so humane, but so angry. Just the beautiful combination of things, and beautiful, brilliant switchback writing. Carol she conjures images over and over again for you, and they're extraordinary. Those 3, The Passion, Ear for Eye, and Escaped Alone. Carol Churchill, Debbie Tucker-Green. Yeah.
Wow. What a selection.
Lucky me.
Yes. What a selection. We need to check all those plays out whenever they're on.
Yeah, go and have a little
any scripts,
search
any
around.
archives. When you were watching any of those 3 or all of those 3, either in the rehearsal process or when you saw the finished product, how did you feel?
I mean, it's hard in my role. It's the moments when you just feel overwhelming gratitude that you were here at this moment in time to bear witness to the birth of something so extraordinary. But you also feel it's so much. Look, listen, the work is what motivates us, right? It's when you see that stuff realised and that they have achieved what they set out do, or at least in part, and it meets its audience and something happens and you've been part of enabling that meeting to happen, and without compromise, you've really gone above and beyond to really help them get what they needed to do it. That's really purposeful. So I felt good.
I bet. How have you approached risk-taking in the arts world, however you define risk?
I absolutely love this question.
Yeah.
And you've sort of spoken into the now with this question. And you're right, it's a brilliant one, and it really flows from those 3 projects, all of which on paper might have sounded really risky. But for me, I feel like at the moment, we're seeing everything through the frame of risk in the cultural sector. I wonder if that's true in film and my sister industries, but certainly in theatre, it feels a really challenging time operationally. In terms of our sort of risk registers, does everyone else have those in their industries? You know,
I think so.
All the red lights are on, and that doesn't bring much joy. But the thing about artistic risk, I've always found really fascinating, because my journey has always been around new work. To me, there's 0 risk in new work. That's like the fountainhead of everything. And in every other industry, no one goes, oh, I'm not going to go and see that new film because it's new. That's a bit risky. Do you know what I mean? Or I'm not going to buy this new novel. I'm not going to turn on this new TV show because it's new. Like in theatre, we've sort of fixated on saying that new equals risk, whereas I've just never seen it. I've never felt it. All I want to do is read new fiction. All I want to do is go and see new art. All I want to see is new theatre. That's not risky to me. But the thing about artistic risk is, as the great Annie Ernaux novelist said, if it isn't a risk, it's nothing. And what does risk really mean? So we're always in the world of it will fail or it might fail. That's our world. But that doesn't take away the endeavour. You can try and mitigate some of the risks, maybe because if it's a title that people know, if you do Macbeth, does that mitigate the risk? If you put a celebrity in it, does that mitigate the risk? Maybe. But they're still making something new together that might not work. I was once described as risk perverse rather than risk averse. But actually I'm a SWOT, right? So I don't actually take risks. I'm very sensible. But in terms of the art, I'm really drawn to creating an environment where artists cannot feel the fear. We all try. I'm thinking a lot about all of this at the moment, what artistic risk really means, how we program our theatres in a way that people keep talking about safe. People are programming safely. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. And if the work is what motivates us, then the work has to keep pushing. I think you could do a whole podcast on risk.
Oh gosh, that's another idea. Yeah, it's really interesting on new work. Sometimes you do get that perception that it's super risky. So just to use a film example, I remember talking to a film producer who said a film like Forrest Gump would never get made today.
Oh, wow. Why?
It would be the idea that it would be much more expensive to sell that new story around the world. So people wouldn't necessarily feel it was justified to do that. There may be more of a desire to, say, create something from a cartoon character we've all heard of and maybe a spin-off of that, and then market something around the world that essentially has already been marketed around the world.
That is terrifying.
It is terrifying. I hope that's not true. So for me, there's so much in the new writing in theatre that I see almost as the origin of so much of what we see in other sister sectors.
100%.
And a lot of just true originality, as in this, fine, as a human, you can relate to all sorts of different stories and themes. But as in, you've never seen this character, you've never heard the story, you don't know how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. And that's what people are showing up for.
That's right. And really interestingly, oh my God, so much about this. I mean, this would be my steer to, if a government is going to be interested in the creative industries as part of its industrial strategy, you have to look at the whole ecology. Mm-hmm. And this is true of film too. If we're not making art as well as making commerce, you won't have any artists to make your commerce. And that's definitely true. That's what the not-for-profit, the subsidised theatre, which is where I've spent all my career, in service. But I do feel in service. We take a portion of our revenue comes from the public purse, and we are not only accountable to our audiences, we're accountable to the future, both to creative careers, but also exactly what you've just said. There has to be a hope, doesn't there, that we're not just in a franchise world, or we're not just trying to sell things, we're also trying to discover things. And I think we choke off that pipeline at our peril, especially in the UK, where it is one of our superpowers.
Yeah, absolutely. The UK has had an unparalleled opportunity to create great theatre. And culturally, people go to the theatre. We have to appreciate, and not every country is theatre seen as something great and joyous. So many people want to come here to create it. So I think we really need to protect that. And a warning, if we don't create anything and we don't create anything new, in 20 years, we will have nothing to watch because no one will know how to create anything. And we'll just be watching reruns of the same things, which...
reruns of Forrest Gump.
Yeah. So as nice as that would be for the Forrest Gump fans, I think we can do better in still pioneering on a lot of new stories.
Totally agree.
What impact do you think theatre specifically has had on the UK as a country and internationally?
This is exactly what we were just talking about, isn't it? I think you've really nailed it in the way you articulated it there. The thing about theatre that's always drawn me to it, there are two things that I absolutely love about it. One is it's super DIY. You can actually make a show quite quickly. And particularly in our theatre buildings, they're hungry beasts. You need to keep feeding them stuff, content. And unlike film, which can really take many years to stack up and get done and then in post and then out, you can have a show from idea to rehearsals to done and closed within 3 months. It's really DIY, and you can do it in really magical ways with very little. And the second thing is that it's human beings gathering in a space and spilling out together into the night afterwards, sharing that space. Have you heard that brilliant thing that says that there was some, I don't know if this is true, but there was some piece of research that showed that audiences in a theatre, their heartbeats start to regulate around one another.
Wow.
I might have made that up, but it's a nice vision.
I can believe that though.
Yeah. So there's something about, well, even as a metaphor, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Which is it regulates hearts. There's something about that quote I gave you earlier about theatre doesn't demand that you change, it just asks you to look at something together, and something, again, theatre is just the best art form for moral questions. The Young Vic especially is beautiful for this. There's the Young Vic space for going, what would you do if ... plays? You all sit there together and then, as I say, spill out into the night with that question or with your own answer. There's nothing like that. And that alone is super impactful in the world. And the fact that in the UK and in London, let's name it, in London, don't take all the funding out of London, because in London, we make the best theatre in the world and make the best theatre artists in the world and the best audiences in the world. And that's our impact. And the trickle through of that, we all know, we can all name those. Actors are the most obvious, but there's loads of other people. I mean, theatre technicians kept all that TV and digital content going through the pandemic because they all sidewayed into that stuff. But also directors, writers, our greatest TV writers came out of the Royal Court, probably. It's a huge mapping exercise if you really wanted to look at the impact that theatre has internationally. It's a very precious part of the ecology of the creative industries in this country, and I really hope that the government cherishes that and really sees that and finds the right proper strategy to sustain that long into the future, long after I'm gone.
Which hopefully is not going to be anytime soon. Yeah, absolutely. We've got so much powerhouse talent here. And internationally, one thing people say quite a bit is the London to New York pipeline when it comes to transferring things. I'd be interested in your thoughts of that, but also I know with a lot of the international work that you would have helped bring about, there will be, whether it's continental Europe or South America, there's so many other regions as well with great artists. So yeah, I would love your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's one of the things that really drew me both to Royal Court and definitely to the Young Vic is the internationalism. And actually our work at National Theatre Wales, we work with collaborated with a number of international artists and companies. It's always been really interesting to me, that axis of sort of hyper-local and very global. You're right, it is New York really, and London is, I think, around writing. I think the fact that we have a language in common and the fact that there is some really brilliant contemporary playwriting coming out of New York at the moment, America as a whole, but often it's those New York theatres that premiere the work that we then spot it and collaborate. And I think that's feeling really fertile at the moment. And that's why we're seeing so much American work actually in the not-for-profit theatres and in the West End, contemporary American work. But I am really interested in our relationship with European theatre makers and theatre making. And I do think it's another place where the UK is pretty unique, because I think there's a thing around inclusion and climate justice and racial justice where some of those big European capitals and big European theatres are a bit behind. And part of that is to do with the way they're structured. So in a lot of Germany, for example, they have a an ensemble model where they have a whole company of actors who make all the work and they have plays that stay in rep all the time. So their capacity to evolve the people is much slower than us. We're really good at moving through companies and ideas and people and artists and bringing a real breadth to the work that we produce. And America is really driving this. American playwriting is really, Black African-American playwriting is really dynamic at the moment and really pushing the ideas of form and formal experimentation, and in a way that mainland Europe, theatre making is not so much at the moment. But we sit in the middle of all of that, you know, the kind of director's theatre that comes from Europe we're really good at, but also the playwriting we're really good at, and also being curious about and can platform and are interested in and we have audiences for. So I think it's another reason why UK theatre is this really beautiful bridge between worlds, not to mention reckoning with our colonial past, which also is a factor.
One of the things that struck me about you, particularly in the early days at the Royal Court, so when I joined the board, COVID, the pandemic, pretty much was kicking off in full swing, and we went into the lockdown maybe a month or 6 weeks later. And one of the things that really struck me about you, going back to what was the phrase you used again? It was the activist SWAT. The activist SWAT.
Oh my God, I'm so depressed that's how I labelled myself. But yeah, go on, keep running with it.
There's a T-shirt in that. I can tell. There is. You came across to me as just so polished in the way an executive who runs like a very big company is very polished, but also with this real sort of just like entrepreneurial, we're getting through this crisis. So I thought, wow, she's like a founder in so many ways. And maybe only known you for maybe a couple of weeks at this point. I always see you as an entrepreneur in so many ways. I don't know if that would surprise you, but how have you used your entrepreneurial skills in organisations, whether you were the founder of the organisation or whether you were not the founder?
This really frightened me because I don't think of myself as an entrepreneur at all. And I feel like at the moment we're all being asked to think of new business models and to innovate and to be more entrepreneurial. My mind just goes, I can't think of anything. So I definitely don't identify as an entrepreneur, but there's a quality of entrepreneurialism. Thank you for those other things you said as well. It's really amazing to have yourself reflected back, especially from your wise eyes and very impressive eyes. So that means a lot. I think the bit of entrepreneurialism that I do recognise is the disruptor bit. And I guess maybe you're right, the possibility bit. I think COVID was horrendous for leaders who were new. At that time, quite a lot of artistic directors and exec directors were new in post, and then it hit. Whereas actually at that point, Vicky, the artistic director, and myself had been in post for 7 years. So we were pretty resourceful and resilient. And actually, we both love adventures and we both love change. So I think we responded to it in that spirit. And it was about, what can we do now? What's possible? What's not possible? What's possible? And it gave us the opportunity to do things that we would never have been able to do in the day-to-day. So I suppose it does allow you to go, oh, we couldn't have done this before. We ran at the Royal Court, I don't even remember, we ran a live stream image of the empty stage.
Yes.
It's the longest running Royal Court show. You could just log on to like a website and just watch it. And you could have it in the background, just this empty stage. We said we'll just run it until we get back in, and of course that ended up being ages. But it was the idea of this brilliant writer called Hester Chillingworth, and that over it was periodic voice like messages. So if you did have it just on quietly next to you while you were Zooming or whatever you were doing, it would occasionally go, everything's going to be all right. Or similar, very funny or very beautiful, very poetic phrases every 20 minutes or so. So little things like that, we'd never have done that otherwise. If entrepreneurialism means to feel positive, to seek opportunities and to disrupt, then I recognise that. But if it means come up with brilliant new business model ideas, please help me. What are they? That's how I respond to that question.
I think you've had some very brilliant new ideas as well, Lucy.
It feels like that's the context we're in at the moment. I think it feels like a lot of pressure. Are our models sustainable in the theatre sector? What do alternative models look like? Economic models I'm talking about, really. Institutions are in quite an interesting dynamic with freelancers. 70% of theatre's workforce is freelance. They're outside our buildings. We don't exist without them. What's that? dynamic? What might that look like in future? I think these are all brilliant frames or questions or inquiries for future leaders. I think we're in a really exciting decade. I genuinely feel that, and I do want to be around for it, because I think our cultural organisations will look very different in 10 years, and that'll be good.
Hopefully we can keep the best of what we've already got and evolve it. And one of the other things that you've championed is key initiatives to address climate change in the art sector. What sort of things can theatres and the art sector do to play a part in addressing climate change?
Yeah, it's been a big part of my practice, actually. It's been really interesting to live through it, because I've been in this space all my life as a human, and I guess as a leader, certainly from during my years at the Royal Court. And then in 2019, something amazing happened. That was like the year of mainstreaming. That's the way I see it, which is when even governments were declaring climate emergency, and Greta was doing her school strikes, and David Attenborough did his thing. And suddenly everyone was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm down with this. And it was great, because I felt like we at the court were ready to meet that mainstreaming moment, and really ready. We'd done the work. Any business now has to have a climate-centred, climate justice. Audiences demand it, consumers demand it. I'm not trying to say just do it because it's good business, obviously, but actually it would look really weird if someone didn't have an account of themselves and their impact on the planet, either as an individual or as a company, whoever you are. That would just be weird now. I would say 3 things. Do it, know it, and talk about it. Mm-hmm. Know it is know your impact, measure it. Make all your staff really fluent in it. Know what your carbon impact is, just as you know what your turnover is. And know what you're doing about it. Know the bits that are really hard, properly know it, like really know what your impact is. And then do it, just do the stuff. If you think, okay, actually we could definitely replace the materials, or we could collaborate over here with this organisation, we could think differently about delivery, whatever it is, just do it. And then the third thing is talk about it, because one of the things to your question, which is why theatres should do something, is we have masses and masses of stakeholders in our public. And if we talk about it, and if we talk to the public about it, loads of what we do is transferable to domestic living. So we might give good ideas, but we also just might inspire people. We also might encourage them to know that they're coming to, for artists, for example, they're coming into a space that is doing its best to minimise its impact on the planet, and to really think holistically, and particularly to think about that work. Why I call it climate justice work is it is so linked to the social justice piece, especially in London. If we're talking about clean air, or if we're talking about even access to theatre that you were talking about, I think these things are really interlinked. They're not like a long list of things that a leader has to do. It's all the same piece of work. It's about how do you, particularly as a publicly funded, public realm space, organisation, making art, how do you do that in a way that has a positive impact and that isn't extractive? My technical director, Craig, we were doing a conversation the other day. We were very early adopters of the Theatre Green Book at the Royal Court and at the Young Vic. The Theatre Green Book is a set of tools, really, for both production, buildings and operations. It's a circular economy model. So rather than a kind of carbon reduction model, it's a materials model. How much of what you're making to build your shows have you taken from existing sources? How many of the costumes, for example, were existing costumes? Did you buy them in charity shops? Rather than a kind of linear model, we're just going to buy loads, we're going to build a show, we're going to throw it away at the end. How can we keep all of this stuff going around in a circular economy? Are you repurposing to make the show, and how much are you recycling back into the sector or into your own work in future? And Craig and I were on a talk about it, about our work on the Theatre Green Book, and he said, it's put the creative back into the creative industries, because it challenges artists to think, when they think about materials, to really think about how they make the work, not just what they're making, and for us too. And that is a creative offer. Do it, know it, talk about it.
Yeah, that's really great guidance. Thank you for that, Lucy. And going back to leadership, the creative climate leadership. So you've led many different organisations, and you've reported to boards, and you are also a board chair yourself. So what do you think are the ingredients for great board dynamics?
I want you to answer this question too. Someone said a brilliant thing to me the other day, which is boards should make the executive love their jobs. It's good, isn't it?
That is good.
The reason why I like it, and why it really spoke to me, is a board's job, really, only job, is to recruit the best execs and to retain the best execs. And to do that, your execs need to feel cherished, but they've also got to feel really motivated by the big picture. And so I think what boards do at their best is motivate around horizons in a way that sometimes leaders you know, if you risk getting really bogged in the day-to-day, in the people stuff, in the financial stuff, whatever it is, board meetings should be that moment where you look up together and ideally your exec walk out of that and go, oh my God, yes, we're on this journey together. That's where we're going. That's where we're going. And I'm at the front of the ship and I can take us there. And obviously a big piece of it, because I'm a SWAT, is about reporting and accountability and record. That's our accountability to the Charity Commission and to the government and all those things. But a big piece of it, a good dynamic between board and exec, is around the horizon work. Do you agree?
I do.
Phew.
Yeah. With any particular board meeting or any particular thing that's going on, it's often about the long-term horizon. It's not about, oh, this one play maybe didn't go the way we wanted it to go. It's about what's the overall picture looking like. So much of it for me was also how are we as an organisation interfacing with the changing world around us. At the time we were at the court together, we had COVID, George Floyd, just everything seemed to be colliding with the world as we knew it. And then all these sort of new possibilities as well, and discussions in the creative industries about how do we treat people? How do we treat freelancers? We had so many people kind of falling through the net. And what are the values that we need to have? Because I think there are so many different ways you could answer any particular question, or so many particular lenses you could look at it through. But what are the ones that we felt were most true to the organisation and also its place in the society, and what does it look like on its best day? How are we getting there? It is hard. I've been exposed to startup boards as well in a very venture-backed environment, which is much more focused on the technology and the financial engineering, which can bring a very different dynamic to conversations. But you do also still there, because, you know, so much of the AI that I've worked on, how does it interface with the society? And a lot of the same things that theatres need to think about, because one of the things that I've enjoyed so much about the theatre sector is, as you mentioned, stakeholders. We talk to schools and the government and audiences and future audiences and all the generous people who offer gifts. And there's so many different people all trying to get to the same place, but maybe from slightly different angles. And how do we make that work together? It's like this massive jigsaw puzzle to fit together.
This is why you were such a brilliant trustee. Your board, in the best world, your board, it's like being coached by 14 of the most brilliant minds. I really was privileged to have that at the court, and I have it at the Young Vic, and you were definitely part of that. You know, that you're also learning sideways from these just people in different sectors, people of different generations, ideally. And there's something about the mini conference that happens at a board meeting of great thinkers that is also super coaching. Exactly as you say, very big picture and enlightening.
Well, that's what we hope to get to. Lucy, where can our listeners find you? And is there anything final you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, find me online. Just look for me. I'm there. Here's what I wanted to share. You've been through this process too at the Royal Court in recruiting for a new artistic director. And we've just done it at the Young Vic. The brilliant Nadia Fall will join in January. During that process, Rufus Norris, who's the artistic director of the National Theatre, was on the interview panel. And he asked the panellists this question. So I guess what I'm sharing is an invitation to whoever is listening. My mum. Hi, Mum.
Hi, Lucy's mum.
It's an invitation to think about how you would answer this question. His question, I really loved it, was, as a leader, sorry, Rufus, if I'm paraphrasing, but this is how it landed with me. As a leader, what do you negotiate within yourself? Like, what are the contradictory bits of yourself that you negotiate in order to lead? And what I liked about that question was inviting people to consider whether they'd really reckoned with themselves. Like, what are their impulses? What impulses do they resist in the way they lead? There are lots of people I've asked that question to, and it's just yielded brilliant answers. And I reflected on it after Rufus asked the question about what do I negotiate in myself? What contradictions do I negotiate in myself? And I think for me, it's that I want to be at the centre, but I also want to be at the edge. And maybe this is the activist SWAT piece. That's why I think we're circling back to it, which is I want to be at the centre. I suppose, I mean, I want to work in these great flagship cultural organisations. I want to be in the crown jewels. Mm-hmm. That was me doing finger quotes. But I also want to be marginal. I want to be at the edge. I want to be in the weird, funky startup that's disrupting. It's interesting that that's the way I've lived my life. So I guess that's my invitation that I'd like to share, is for people to think about what are the kind of contradictions that make you the leader you are or want to be, and hold those two things in the same way that you lead.
Oh, that's so powerful.
Does that make sense?
What a great question. Yeah.
It's a good question, isn't it? Well done, Rufus.
Yeah, well done. I don't think I've met him, but well done, Rufus. And Lucy, I can't let you go without sharing your socials and your Substack.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Do you know what's interesting? Is I did start writing a Substack last year, inspired by art. We did a show at the Young Vic called The Second Woman, which was a 24-hour durational piece in which Ruth Wilson, the mighty Ruth Wilson, performed the same scene over and over again with 100 different men, non-professional actors, apart from some absolute superstars who turned up to do it with her. But she basically, for 24 hours non-stop, performed the same scene. And It was revelatory. Read my Substack about why. So yeah, I am on Substack, Lucy Davies Substack. And then that kind of prompted me to throw down, just for myself really, I mean, they're all there, but they're for the public too. So I'm there, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn, you know, that old place.
That old place. Absolutely. Lucy, it's been such a joy and a privilege to have you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I am so grateful. Honestly, your questions were very elegant, but they really provided space for reflection as I travelled into this room this morning, and it's always gorgeous to spend time with you. And I'm honoured to be in the company of incredible women and others that you're gathering for this. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Road of Stars podcast and our dynamic guests. I hope you are inspired for your own creative journey. Keep connecting, keep creating.